Good morning. Today we are going to see about the topic called constructors. So as constructor is a special kind of method in Java. So before going for the constructor, we can have an overview of what is class and what is object. So class is a collection of certain data members, attributes, and the function definitions. So what a class will hold set of a collection of data members that is member functions, a class inside another class function definitions, and the other case we can have interface. So the binding up of all these things into a single unit, we can say it as the property as encapsulation. So inside the class we can all have a set of data members like this. The next, what are the attributes of the class? We can have a look. So first is modifier. So the next is a class keyword, class name, superclass, interface. So these are all the class attributes. So every time when we are creating a class, we can have its own class name. It is a user defined name. That name must be given in the form of camel case notation. That is, first letter must be in capital followed by all the lowercase letters. The next modifier. The modifier will indicates the scope of the class, where we can access that class. If it is declared as a public, we can access it outside of the class. If it is declared as private, we cannot access it outside, and if it is declared as protected, we can access it by inheritance. That is, by using the concept of inheritance, we can access that class members as well as the methods. And next is a superclass. So when we can say a class as a superclass means when another class is inheriting its properties, that is attributes and methods inside this class, we can say that class as a superclass or a parent class. The next is interface. When we are going for multiple inheritance, where we are going to inherit from more than one base class, that facility is not available in case of Java. So instead of having it as a multiple inheritance, we can go for as interface. So we can have two interfaces and we can inherit the properties from that two interface by a single class. The next is a simple example for a class. So here my class name is a simple, and it is public static void main is a declaration for the main. So all the arguments for the main that is necessary for the main or any runtime command line arguments can be saved in this array arguments. Then public static void main is the syntax for the creating main. So here it is declared as a public, so we can access it outside of the class also. Then static, when any function name is declared as static, we doesn't require any object for calling that function. Then void is the return type for the function main. So inside that main, I have given only one print line statement, system.out.println of hello Java. So when we are executing that program, hello Java, that line will get printed. So print line function is inside that out class. So the out class definition is inside the system package. So every time when we are calling the function, we should call it as system.out.println. The next, we are going for the definition of object. So object syntax is class name followed by the object name. We can have our own name for the object. So object is used to call the data members as well as the functions inside the class. So the next, we are going for the constructor. So constructor is a special type of method which does not require any object to call that constructor. It doesn't need any explicit calling also. It is automatically invoked. When we are calling that constructor, it gets automatically called at the time of object creation, and it requires one new operator to create a constructor, that is to call that constructor. To call the constructor, we need to have new operator, and at the time of object creation, this constructor will get automatically called. So the definition of the constructor will be given inside the class. So the next constructor name will have its same name as that of class name. So the class name is used as is same as that of file name as well as for the constructor name. So the next is the types of constructor. We are having two different types of constructor. One is parameterized, another one is default. So the default constructor example here it is given. So when any constructor is not having any parameters, we can say it as a default constructor. So the line which I have bolded is the object creation line. At the time the constructor is automatically invoked. So here class followed by the class name 1. This one constructor is definition is given here, only just print line statement. So the next is void main. inside the main I have created an object for the class 1, b is the object. So at the time of object creation, this constructor is implicitly called, that is called. The next one is gets invoked, and this line will get printed. So this is an example for default constructor. So the next example is to the same as default constructor, because the class is followed by the class name student3, and here I have created two objects s1 and s2. At the time of object creation, the constructor is called. So I'm calling one function display with the help of object. So the display is going to print you ID and name, but this ID and name is not initialized with the values. So these values can be initialized with the help of constructor, and that special kind of constructor is called parameterized constructor. So a constructor which is holding some specific number of parameters is called parameterized constructor. This is an example for parameterized constructor. Here the same example, only the class name I have changed as student4. S1 and S2 are the objects, and this constructor is holding some specific number of arguments, that is the value for ID and name is given here. So at the time of calling that constructor, these values are copied to the variables I and n, and it is implicit and it is explicitly copying it to the variables ID and name. So when I am calling that s1.display function, so the display will print you the ID and names where the values are fetched from the constructor calling. The next s2 is holding some other values, and these values are copied to the variables ID and name. At the time s2.display function is called, it gets printed. So these are the difference between default and parameterized constructor. So a constructor, when it is holding some specific arguments, we can say that as parameterized constructor. If it does not have any specific parameters, we can say it as a default constructor. So these are the two different types of constructors, and thanks for listening to the video.